Hey, everybody, what's going on? Welcome to another show. I am joined by Micheal from the Canadian Atheist podcast. We are going to be discussing a conversation that he had, I think this was a little over, maybe just a week ago, a little over a week ago.
Weekish, yep.
Yep. With JRobin, everybody's favorite up and coming precept. I'm not going to be charitable. He's a jerk. But in this particular conversation, I think there's some decent parity here because JRobin's not quite as caffeinated as he is in some other conversations, and he doesn't have a band hammer in this particular room. So, yeah. So this one was done on Clubhouse, about a week or so ago. My brother and partner in crime, Jay, was nice enough to record this for me on OBS since I can't get it to work for some reason on my haunted, broken down jalopy of a laptop. But we'll be playing it from that. I have not heard this entire thing. It's about 3 hours long. Obviously, we are not going to cover all of it because that would be impossible. Micheal and I both have, only so much time to cover on this. So we're going to be kind of starting this up. We might be skipping around a little bit in this. The beginning of it, when they start kind of getting into things, I think is kind of interesting because Micheal does get an opportunity to ask, I think, one or two particularly interesting questions, specifically in the case of JRobin, given what I know about JRobin and his approach to things. And hopefully, if we can kind of we can maybe kind of jump around. We're not going to be wandering too much in here, but so I'm going to be kind of like moving forward through this. If Micheal kind of gives me the nod and lets me know, okay, this part's a little sleepy, nothing too much happens here. But other than that, we're gonna kind of play it by ear and see how far we get. As usual, everybody in the live chat, thanks for showing up. Apologies for being a little bit late. If there's any audio qualities, video quality issues that pop up, holler at us in here, and I will do my best to try to fix them. Other than that, we'll minimize us down to the smallest here. Not that it really matters since we're just kind of playing off a club deck screen. But yeah, well, I guess we'll get this started as soon as Micheal, do you have anything you want to start off by saying first before we jump into the recording?
I would say overall, this was. And maybe I'm a masochist, but I didn't hate this conversation, and it was interesting. There are a couple of sleepy parts. The one thing I'll say that I said to Jefferson off air is I don't mute people. My friend Dean and we've been doing a podcast over 4 years now, and we've never muted a soul. And like we've had Kent Hovind and some other interesting souls on the show. And I don't mute people. I don't like it. I don't fault the people who, for their thing, like to mute people out of frustration or whatever else, but I don't like to do it. So there are a few times where there's a little bit of over talking, which was less than ideal. But yeah, it's just a rule that I have. So going into that, let's give her and see what kind of trouble we can get into.
All right. Okay, we're going to start playing here. I might have to skip around a little bit. I've tried to push this first recording into it a little bit because there's just sort of the basic back and forth. How you doing? Does my sound work? Can you hear me? That kind of stuff. So I think we're past that part, ready to get into the meat of the conversation.
Yeah, Robin was mobile, I think, for some of this, so he gacked out a few times. But okay. But yeah, like it wasn't terrible.
Casey Randis, I'd say you weren't you on Praise's channel last night? He was debating Kevin. Yeah. Jefferson here and accounted for. Good to see you, Roundy D. All right, let's get this up. And AJ says, I think this was the first JS live stream review of a video that I haven't seen yet. Yeah, I'm getting into some original content here, thanks to Micheal. So, yeah, I saw this. I think this was like last Thursday, maybe, when this conversation happened, and I was listening to as much of it as I could while I was working. And then Micheal asked me, "Hey, would you be interested in doing a review of it?" So we set it up for today, and we've had it in the books for a while. So, yeah, here we go. I have not heard all of this myself. I listened to quite a bit of the beginning of it, probably the first. On and off the first 45 to 60 minutes of it, but I would have to mute if I received a phone call or something with work. I just kind of have it playing in the background, so some of this I'm not familiar with. So, yeah, here we go.
Hopefully that's online, Robin, with what you're looking for as well.
Yep, definitely.
Okay, so you are our guest, and I say our because the CA is the podcast that I do, Canadian Atheist, and I do it with a dear friend of mine, Dean. But he's unable to be here because he has a real job, and kids ruin everything. So that's why it's just me. But when I say our, that's what I mean when I say that. So you're our guest. So fire away with your with whatever you want to say.
Okay. So you're an atheist?
I am an atheist, yes. And
Okay,
just for
Oh, go ahead.
clarification, I do take the SEP stance. I believe gods do not exist.
Okay. So then, because the word for atheism is taken without qualification to be global, I'm going to use a general definition of God to work with, because you're a global atheist. So God, in the general conception, is characterized as a being that is a mind and all things, and that all things drive and depend upon. God is essentially the ultimate metaphysical reality. Okay.
I want to pause this right here because I was actually listening to a couple of Christians talk about this on a stream, I think a couple nights ago, and I went in there, and I'll admit it, I was in there to troll in the comment section. Sometimes I like to bully. They quickly bullied me back, so it was fine, and I was outnumbered. My brother was there. It was like 2 against 6. But at some point, Smokey Saint was in there, and he was yelling about these other gods. My brother was trying to give kind of a brief explanation of like gods that we kind of hold in our in a conceptual realm. You know, the gods of Zeus and Thor versus the god of Yahweh and this kind of thing. And this is an interesting thing that I think a lot of these guys get mixed up on. JRobin, I think, is confused about this too, because he's like, no. For a global atheist is somebody who rejects the notion of this particular God as defined by him as an ultimate metaphysical foundational creator mind. That is not every God that's out there. There are other religious.
Yeah, for sure. And I do touch on that as we go through.
Yeah. And I think it's weird how breezy and flippant that he's gotten with that. Because I don't even think Darth is quite that careless with it. I mean, I think he implies kind of the same thing. I don't think I've ever heard him correct JRobin on this, so I have to assume that he's okay with it. Because if he wanted to jump JRobin for being wrong or being weak or something like that, he certainly would. But yeah, that notion has never totally flown with me, because one of the things that they'll try to say is like, no, the God that we're talking about that makes it so special is that it's transcendent. Well, okay, but Allah is transcendent. Yahweh is transcendent. Jesus is also, because it's Yahweh, also transcendent. There's other gods. These other ones don't count because they're not transcendent. Okay, well then by definition, if someone like Micheal comes along and says, my stance is I believe that gods don't exist, all gods, that includes the ones defined as transcendent and the ones defined as otherwise.
Yeah, and like whether it's like Brahman, Vishnu, and Ganesh, right? From the Hindu pantheon, it's all the same thing. But he stays hyper. He does stay hyper general in this sense, and it's funny because you mentioned Double D there, and what I find interesting about that is, so I'll go into rooms, like I'll go into Reformation, I'll go into worldviews and conflict and stuff like that. But if DD's there, I duck out because I will not interact with that individual anymore, and so. It means that I haven't had a chance to see whether or not the two of them have been together, like in rooms or not. But yeah, I think if he had access to that, like if Double D were to listen to this, then he might feel the need to correct Robin, and of course Robin would have to kiss the ring, right? Because that's what he does.
Yeah. Okay.
So God does not exist because.
Man, we're going right to that already. Okay, so can I ask? It's my goal to answer this question. However, I need to know if this God has any other properties.
No, all we're working with is the general conception. Other conceptions of God may include this property plus other extended properties, but right now I'm dealing with a general conception of God because we're a global atheist.
Okay, so just a deistic creator.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, that's a completely unfalsifiable premise. I don't even know how I could even start with explaining why this creator God doesn't exist. There's no way to falsify that something didn't fart everything into creation and then piss off and start playing tiddlywinks in the corner. So unless we can get a little bit more specific, I'm hoping this doesn't just fizzle out into nothing right away. I mean, like, and that's
you
why I'd like to get. Sorry, please finish.
you believe God doesn't exist, right?
Well, yeah, I believe gods plural don't exist, because I mean,
Right.
you accept
Okay,
that
good.
there's more than one God that's worshipped by people, right?
Yes, but the definition of God I gave would encapsulate many, if not most, of the definitions of God that exist out there.
Many, if not most, but not all.
Yeah.
So even there, like, I mean, I don't think he even realizes that he's conceding. Like, you wouldn't be a global atheist if you rejected the transcendent, that kind of definition of God, this transcendent ultimate creator mind, the immaterial mind that is also ultimate.
Yeah, and that's when he said God, I corrected him and said God's plural. Because I'm not interested in taking this kind of this weak position. But I also do want to, and that's why I asked him. Can we get specific? And I try to, I continually try to hammer that down. And it's not for, well, you'll see when it happens, when he finally acquiesces to his professing Christian self.
Yeah. Alrighty.
That are commonly used. So this is a good jumping off point to explore, because you believe, because this isn't a category of a God and in the general conception, that this being does not exist. Would you consider yourself a rational individual?
Oh, that depends. I do, but ask my wife and she'll probably give you a different answer. So,
Okay. Do rational people have positions that they can defend rationally?
yeah, I sure hope so. So what's interesting is so we have to, okay, and this is why I like to. So one of your cohorts who's down in the audience and who will positively never speak in here, he will commonly ask people to be clear and specific in their answers. And Robin, I'd love to be clear and specific in my answer, but you're being incredibly vague in your description. So I'm wondering if we can get more specific, because you
I'm
are
not
a
being
Christian.
vague.
You are a Christian, yes?
Yes.
Okay. So you don't believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't believe in a deistic creator, right?
Yeah, but that's irrelevant, because my position is not relevant to your justification. I could be an atheist asking you the exact same question and it would still stand,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
whatever position.
But I would hope that the atheists would know that they're not getting this notion of like a global atheism right by trying to define. First, it was like God is defined as this thing, and then when you push back on that, it's like, well, I'm not, it's many gods or most gods are this thing. Like, okay, so you've already taken a step off that original stance. Like, if an atheist is presenting this as like a logical quandary, let's talk about this as if it's a hypothetical. Then hopefully they would be getting these terms a little bit better. What I find interesting about JRobin, and I'll try not to wander too much around with this, is that it sounds like what he's trying to do is just approach this as if it's a hypothetical for the skeptic. But then when a skeptic like you, Micheal, start to push back on definitions of it, you can hear him start to become emotionally invested in it as if he's defending his own God.
Yeah, a little bit. And what's interesting, and this is something that one of the irony is, or one of the ironies, many ironies that exist in this conversation, is atheists are so commonly accused of shifting the goalposts. And he's running around the field with them. Like he's not shifting them; he's completely moving them around right now. He doesn't want to. Like it seems evident that he doesn't want to, at least yet, talk about his God.
Yeah. I like those. So then why is he defining God if his position doesn't matter? Yeah, I mean, I could I kind of agree with that, but it seems to me like this is one of these things that JRobin has picked up from probably debating people like within the like Ask Yourself and any of the people that are on his Discord channel, where you're gonna, if you set it up as a hypothetical, because they'll do that, they'll set it up as a syllogism or something like that, and then pick at the argument, like, right, and then go from there, and they'll show, oh, there's some strengths here, there's some weaknesses here, and then move on. But I don't think that JRobin can escape the tendency that, like, if I can present this this just rhetorically rock solid, lockdown deductive syllogism, then it's actually true too. You kind of jump that Humean, Yeah, even Hume didn't agree with that, right? Like if it's logically necessitated in an argument, that does not mean it's logically necessary to exist in reality. And I'm not convinced that JRobin gets that.
Yeah, no, it's true. I had a conversation with Roy and Nate in the Ask a Christian Clubhouse room a couple of days ago, and this one guy Jesse was in there, and he said, I said, can you demonstrate that this God exists? And he pipes up and says, I can demonstrate that God exists. He said, I'll give you the argument for it. And I said, what do you mean the argument for it? I said, you can put together a syllogism that is, with a few premises and a conclusion that's perfectly valid. I said, but unless it's valid and sound, the conclusion doesn't necessarily follow. So you have to make the premises have to be sound. You have to demonstrate the truth of them before you can just say, and therefore Jesus. And that conversation fizzled out quickly when I pointed that out to him.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Pinworm, does anyone know the area of the country JRobin is from? He's got no accent whatsoever.
He would not. I asked him. So like in the preamble that we skipped over, and it's probably better anyway. In the preamble, I said, so, because I'll tell everybody, I don't give a shit. I'm just outside Toronto, Canada. I'm just east of Toronto. And, but he's like, I'm in the United States. And I'm like, you don't want to get any more specific? And he's like, no. And in my head, I'm like, man, fucking Christian paranoia. I don't get it, but whatever.
When he is called to answer Pinworms, I don't know why. And Michael, I don't know why he was being that cagey to you. All the Skeptic Generation videos that he's called into, he's always said that he is JRobin from DC, or Robin from DC.
Oh, I don't listen to Skeptic Generation, so I wasn't aware.
Oh, no, that's fine. Pinworm probably doesn't either, but any of those particular videos, now he could be lying to them, but I don't know. It depends on how they call screen. I don't know that they would be cool with that, but he could be lying to them too. But he's always come in as they've always introduced him. This is Robin from DC. So
yeah, I wasn't aware.
Yep.
The asker or the person who's the questioner, the position of the.
Oh, and yes, that's D as in dog, C as in Charlie, as in District of Columbia, Washington D.C. Not BC as in British Columbia. Yeah. And JRobin's not Canadian. I don't think Canada will have that. I'm just kidding.
We're so accepting.
That's true. Now, I don't know that if JRobin would be able to tolerate Canada.
Yeah, that's a different thing. We were joking. I was joking. Anyway, I don't want to talk about last night too much, but yeah, we were joking around about the whole Canada thing last night too. Yeah, I'm so used to getting jabs about it.
My brother's asking here, doesn't it seem like JRobin wants Michael, along with others, to demonstrate the proposition of atheism and not a person's attitude towards that belief or towards that proposition? Demonstrate the proposition. Yeah, if you mean that he wants someone to prove the reality or the actuality of what that proposition is based on, yeah, that seems to be what he wants. Like you need to. Not so much like, I don't care like what you think about it. I need you to tell me why it's the case that God can't ontologically be there, right? So yeah, they're usually asking, and JRobin's one of the, well, at least he used to be. I think he's gotten a little bit narrower in this, but that idea of like, well, you need to present an argument for why it's the case that God doesn't exist. Like, are you interested in that? Or are you interested in why I don't believe in it? Because that is a different burden.
Yeah, and precisely. And this actually goes back. This makes me think of Christopher Hitchens' debate with William Lane Craig, probably a decade ago, where he said, can you tell me any, can you give me any, proof as to why atheism is true? And this is something that came up last night when I was on Praise's channel. I'm like, I don't know how to tell you. So, I mean, well, I'm proof that atheism is true. I'm an atheist. I exist. Therefore, atheism is true. It's like I can't demonstrate, because the whole idea of atheism is it's the proposition that another thing, either you don't accept that it exists if you take the weak position, or you believe it doesn't exist if you take the strong position like me. So it's this weird thing. But this burden shifting that's been going on within the Christian community for some time, and is particularly evident, especially within some of these clubhouse areas, where it's like, you have to show me why it doesn't exist. It's like, that's not how, I'm reminded of that meme with those two old ladies, where the one lady goes, that's not how any of this works. It's like, that's not how this works. You're making the claim, right? And they try to shift that around and say, but you're claiming it doesn't exist. And if we get specific, like I will say, I am convinced that Christian God doesn't exist. And if you want to go into the reasons why, happy to do that. And I think I can actually show how the Christian God doesn't exist. But of course, he doesn't want to do that.
No. All right, here we go.
questioner is not relevant to the questionee's justification. Okay.
Yeah.
So in this
I
case,
agree.
my position as a Christian bears no relevance to how you're going to answer the question.
Right. So I sure hope we get there, because as a Christian, I would hope you would want to defend 1 Peter 3:15. So
Yeah, but I mean, you asked me to.
Okay. The best way I can answer your question is, the God you've presented is unfalsifiable. I can't tell you why that God doesn't exist.
So then you don't have a rational defense for your atheism?
Oh no, that's the thing, Robin.
I love that. Like, oh, so if you can't prove it false, then you're irrational for not believing. Like, what he wants you to do is assume that it's real because you can't assume it to be false. It's like you wouldn't do either of those things. Both are leading towards the same irrationality. It's not demonstrable, so it's not. You're not going to say anything. Now you can make claims about the fact that you believe that to be the case. I believe that it might be true, but if someone's in, well, I want you to like, and Christians and the apologists used to get ticked off about this back in the, when the four horsemen of new atheism started to rear their heads. It was the like, they hated the fact that they were being asked, like, well, if any atheist came along, well, can you demonstrate the God actually exists, right? They hated the fact that they weren't being asked about their faith, because they can talk about their faith all they want, right? And they can use all sorts of different scripture to defend the faith that they have. And from most faith traditions, that's kind of unassailable, right? Like the fact that you believe that to be the case, like, okay, that's what you believe. You think the stories are true. There might be evidence to the contrary. Maybe you've got some doubts in the back of your head, blah, blah, blah. But holding me as a believer, holding me to this idea that I have to prove this mysterious transcendental being exists is just unfair. I would agree with them. But now, after getting ticked off hearing that question, they've flipped it around. Like, no, you need to prove ontologically. You need to prove that it's actually not real. Like, that's the same thing that you complained about before.
Yeah, but now the shoe's on the other foot, right? And so
Right.
that's why, and they're totally cool with it. Funny enough, but that's why I take the very, very specific stance. I'm like, let's talk about the Christian God, because I was a Christian for a long time. You want to talk Bible? Pull out the Bible. Let's talk about it. And we'll talk about all the things that are totally absurd within those pages. And so it's, but it's still funny. Like, I'm still trying to draw that out of him, and it's just super weird.
Yeah.
And this is why I asked to get specific. If you want to stay vague in general, I can only give you vague and general answers. So what you've presented me with is something that is ultimate and a mind, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the ground of all things. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. So that is not, you can't get anywhere but deism with that. And a deistic creator, like I said, that farted everything into existence and then pissed off to play tiddlywinks, that's unfalsifiable. Like, for example, like, whether you want to talk about any other unfalsifiable claims, right? Prove to me unicorns don't exist. You've heard of the Russell's teapot thing, right? Like, there are claims that are made that are unfalsifiable. You've presented me with an unfalsifiable
That's a category. That's a category error. But let's get to the
I don't understand why he's saying that's a category error. That doesn't make sense.
Well, because he's looking at unicorns and the teapot as a different category than a god. This is an instance where he likes to toss in buzzwords. This is only my opinion, but he's trying to toss in buzzwords to sound smart. It's a category error. It's a this, it's a that. He wants, because when he plays these back for his other minions and his master, he wants people to hear those things and be like, oh, JRobin's smart. Look what he did there.
Yeah. And I think he's trying to make some moves with some things he can't handle. So
I'm no philosopher and I'm no logician, right? But it's anyway, just go on.
Well, yeah, what I think is weird is that I get the impression that what JRobin knows about philosophy has come from his time spent on Discord servers trying to learn this by butting heads with people. And so he's picking up philosophical concepts about philosophy But he's trying to learn. He's looking into those to find weapons to use against people he already knows he disagrees with.
Yeah,
So,
which is a dishonest way to look at philosophy. I mean, like and again, not being a philosopher, but you go into this to ask questions and to learn, right? And he has you got it right. He's attempting to weaponize it.
yeah. Yep, hit the nail on the head there. He talks about buzzwords and fallacies to see what sticks. Yes, he does. Title says the deistic gods also do not engage in revelation, which is JRobin's evidence of existence. Exactly, and
his revelatory epistemology. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, Tyler's got it exactly correct. JRobin has a history of doing this. Double D, Mad Gary, he does the same thing. Where they want to kind of get you on this thing where I'm like, oh, okay, so tell me why an ultimate creator doesn't exist. But then, and it happens often. Usually, Darth is pretty good at this. I think he's capable of kind of reading into people's emotions just well enough to know that they're getting a little frustrated with him, and that's when he'll slip in a new kind of unfounded, previously unintroduced property for his god. Like, oh, it's revelational and it's personal. And those will just kind of slide in there. Usually when the person's trying to like, wait, what is fumbling around like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
What do you mean by an ultimate immaterial mind that is the creator of all things? And like, oh, well, it's also revelational. That's not a universally held God concept. So yeah. Yep.
The point here is atheism is a denial of deism, right? They're mutually exclusive, correct?
Atheism is a denial of deism. So deism is like a general.
Yeah, I don't think that's true because I mean, most atheists I don't think are deists, but the odd thing about him asking that question is I don't think that I'm pretty sure that Christians think that deists are atheists.
Yeah, that's probably true. You know, I mean, and I mean, it's funny. I've spent a good amount of time thinking about this. Do I think that, like from what he's mentioned so far, does a deist creator exist? I certainly don't believe that. But I couldn't claim to know that. But I don't think that's the case. Like I don't believe that to be the case.
Yeah. I like this one. A disembodied mind exists because
Funny. Yeah. General God, right? Like not anything tied to
a God that does not
theistic pantheon.
Well, a God, yeah, we're talking about a conception of God that does not intervene or reveal things in the world when it comes to human affairs.
Yeah, so it's revelatory now.
Right. Atheism is categorically the denial of deism. As an atheist, you should have the feeder for the conception of God.
I may have thrown that criticism out there quick. I think he was just trying to sum something up.
A bit there.
Am I good now?
Yeah, that's sorry. You roboted out just a second there. Could you repeat what you said?
Yeah, if you're an atheist, you should have a defeater for God, whatever, in the conception I'm talking about. Then, if you're an atheist, and you made it clear that you're the God we're talking about, you made it clear that atheism is the denial of gods. You hold positively
that you don't want to defend your God.
You could have asked me to defend.
You're in the matrix.
Am I better now? Am I better now?
Better. Sorry, you keep on roboting out a little bit. I'm not sure whether you're mobile or not. It's not the end of the world because I mean we've got nothing but time. But I just wanted to let you know that I wasn't hearing exactly what you were saying.
Okay, if it happens again, let me know. I'll see if we can try to fix something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not an issue of me defending my beliefs because you actually called me to ask you questions first. Right? If you had asked me at the start of the conversation to defend my belief in God, I would have gladly done so. But you said I was the guest, right? The replays are on. You said I'm the guest, and then you invite.
Like how he's already talking to you. He's already treating you like a hostile witness.
Well, and it's
show.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting because in somehow it's my fault because I wanted to be charitable and say please begin, and so all of a sudden now. It's like that means here, take everything. It's all on you now.
Yeah.
I just found that, but I didn't want. I think I was far too agreeable during most of this. I was just like, yeah, let's just roll with it.
This just seems like a spoiled child's way of acknowledging, like, yeah, you gave me an inch and I'm going to take a mile, and that's your fault. Remember, you wanted this. I mean, he's really embracing, his malignant narcissism quite well. He really needs to find his way to therapy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when you talk about making, like concessions, I do have to, like, I have to concede at one, like in order to, because he has those proverbial heels dug in, right? And until I concede, there's no way to move forward.
Yeah. Yep. All right. I'm excited to see where he's going to go.
I didn't say anything to you. Me to ask you questions, so I started asking you about your position. So it has nothing to do with what my justification is. Okay,
right.
So
my position on
talk about my position.
Sorry, go ahead, please finish. Sorry, I interrupted you. I apologize.
Yeah, if you want to switch now from talking about my position to talking about your position, I just want to make that point clear. That's what you'd be doing. And the question on the table that I've asked you has still not yet been answered.
Yeah, so it is interesting because, and again, I told you this before, and it is 100% true. It is my goal to be honest with you, and the God that the deistic God, or the deistic representation of a God that you have presented, is unfalsifiable. Okay, I don't believe that a God like that exists because there's no evidence to support that, right? And whenever someone is like, and even you don't believe that a God like that exists. If I'm speaking to someone who has a
Miguel says, I think there's supposed to be a no. This guy is broke, lonely, and has never had a girlfriend. I knew he was talking about, but I wanted to. Hey, I'm not broke. But he was talking about. He did clarify. JRobin. Thanks for the clarification, Miguel. Just in case I took it personally and had to quit the stream due to heartbreak, my crushing loneliness.
A deal, like for example.
Oh wait, were you going to say something, Michael? Sorry.
No, I was just giggling. I was giggling over crushing loneliness. Good friend of mine. He has a YouTube channel as well. Same Skylar Fiction. He's taking a bit of a break right now. Anyway, Skylar is a deist, right? He believes in a general creator God, but not a theistic God like you believe in. And we've spoken on air, we've spoken off air. And one of the things he said to me is, he said, I have no way to demonstrate that this thing that I believe exists. I believe it. And we had talks about the differences between belief and knowledge, right? Because knowledge is a subset of belief. You can believe something and still not know it, but you can't know something without believing it. So I don't believe that the deistic God that you have presented exists. I can't possibly know whether or not it exists because it's completely unfalsifiable. But and that's the best I can do, and that's the most honest I can possibly be in answering your question.
Well, this is not an issue of mere non-belief or lack of knowledge. We're not talking about, at least the question I posed to you, there was no relevance to knowledge in the question I posed.
Right.
Let's be clear. Let's be clear again. Let's make sure that we're clear.
What is he trying to?
Your position is that God does not exist as I've defined him. Now, if you're a rational individual, you should have a falsifier for God, which you just told me you don't. So the only conclusion that can be drawn is that you're holding to your atheism irrationally.
I don't understand.
There it is.
Yeah, I don't understand why he has such a problem with this. Like, if one of the basic definitions, and now that you're not the first person he started doing this with.
Of course not.
His journey towards divine simplicity and some of these other concepts, and his hatred for agnosticism, per Daddy Darth, has been to kind of get onto that train of thinking like, well, you know what, you can't just tell me that it's unfalsifiable. You have to have a falsifier. Like, you can't have a falsifier for something that's not falsifiable, which was the point that you're making. implicitly, and he's just not getting it. No, if you have a belief, and so if you're saying that you don't believe in gods and you have to have been able to falsify it, like, well, okay, what
Yeah.
what about the God that you're talking about is anything other than just asserted by you, right? This is the weird thing that I find, like they are like, well, you know what? Uh, if anybody wants a less roundabout version of this, go listen to Mr. Batman if you
Oh,
can find him. He's
how
on
could you
several.
possibly want to subject your audience to him?
Yeah, he actually has Scott. I think it's Scott Smith 75. He's a YouTube channel, and he's been collecting and kind of reposting.
Yeah, they're very funny.
Yeah, these Darth Dawkins argument snippets from the past, and they go back a ways. So there's one that he does with Mr. Batman. I think he just put it out a couple days ago, and I think it's a recent one. Mr. Batman is talking to somebody, the voice I don't recognize. I don't know who the user is, but he lays out epistemology in such a broken way. Like, it is so it is so wrong. It's like that scene in Billy Madison. Everything that you have said has made everyone, we were all more stupid just for hearing it,
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. My favorite part of those videos is the Benny Hill music that he
yeah.
plays.
But with it, yeah, his take on this kind of stuff, that I don't think it's very far from JRobin, because it's like, no, you need to falsify the God that I'm asserting to be true. I'm like, well, how do you know it to be true? Well, because it's impossible for it not to be true. Like, oh,
Yeah.
cute. Now, how did you get there? Well, because if I put it in a logical syllogism, okay, so what about a logical syllogism mirrors actual reality? I get
Yeah.
that you've got evidence. I get that you want to say that this argument is evidence for the existence of God because it rationally lines up. You might be able to say that. Is that good evidence for it actually being true? Probably not.
Yeah. And that's the difference. Like, because some of these wannabe, and I'll say wannabe, that's not very charitable, but some of these wannabe apologists, they're like, I have put together a syllogism, therefore I'm right and you're wrong. And it's like, how'd you get there, man? Like, let's talk about each one of these things, but they don't want to do that, right? And Robin is about to want to advance the conversation but he has to put his marker on the board. He has to score his point that I'm irrational. And it's like, he's like, I'll put the mark on the board, and now we can move on.
Yeah. And yeah, Michael Fredgren is, but JRobin doesn't believe in the deistic God either. What's his falsifier? Yeah, I think in his case, he would just again assert properties that are necessary for the existence of his God. The deistic God, by definition, lacks those ones, so it can't exist. It's the to me, it's just the crazy. It's like, look, I don't know why they're not understanding that they are literally defining something into existence, and then falsifying other things because they don't meet the definition that they've asserted. They have no, and even within the confine, like, and they seem to think like, well, if I can construct it in an argument where those things are as defined, they're necessary, then that means they're necessary actually. Darth has basically said that.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. And it's like, if you are the mold that they have constructed, within that mold, sure, I'll concede. Sure, that God exists. Sure. Within that mold, sure, whatever. Because you have hyper defined it to be so. But now if you want, and we have to stay general about that. And then it's, yay, you've agreed that God exists. Oh, by the way, John 3:16.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Now it's gospel time. Yeah. It's like a 1-2 punch. First, I'm going to, you can't prove my God's wrong, which is basically what this is.
Yeah.
Right. You can't say that it's wrong, which would be fine if they left it at that. That used to be the precept kind of take. We're both making presuppositions. We both have to at least assume subjective experience. So part of what I think is that subjective experience coming from is these we have these faith traditions that have these stories and have this. That's why I tend to believe there's more than just this physical world, just the mundane. I think there might be a transcendental spiritual realm, and this God exists there, and that's what's responsible for all this. Okay, that's a belief that you have. That's your belief. And you don't, as a faith thing, you actually can rely on that epistemologically, right? Like, it's a faith. I can't entirely prove it. It's an intuition. It's a notion. It's the hope for things not seen, whatever you want to do with that.
Yeah.
That used to be enough for them as believers, but now they've decided to try to take philosophy and then weaponize it in a way that it never was meant to be.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that one of the things they're doing in doing this is, I think they're also violating one of the tenets of Christianity. Hebrews 11 says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. You first have to believe that he exists and that he earnestly seeks those, or earnestly reveals himself to those who seek him, something like that. I may have the wording not quite right.
Mhm.
So the problem is that by trying to say, I know God exists, I know, they're actually violating something that the Bible says. That the Bible says they must have faith. So you can't please God without it. So I found that funny too.
Yeah. And for Mr. Pinmore, why doesn't Batman and Darth not like each other? They seem to be the same. You answered the question, so that's the answer to your question.
Yeah,
They are the same.
yeah. They're the batteries that push together, and yeah, or like the magnets you try to force together. Yeah. Well, no, and see, that's a little bit slippery what you did there, Robin, is because I told you I believe gods don't exist, and you said God singularly. Are we speaking about a specific one now?
Speaking about God as I defined him at the onset of the conversation, and
Right.
God would be so God as I've just defined it would be in the category or in the set of gods plural. So yes, I could say if you categorically deny all gods, and I bring to you something that's in the category of gods in the set of gods, then I could refer to it as God. The point is, you'd still be in the denial of its existence. You just told me you can't falsify it, but you have to have a falsifier if you're holding the position rationally. So the only conclusion that can be drawn here is that your atheism is irrational.
Do I have to have a falsifier for unicorns too?
For one, that's a category error because it's not. Yes, it is, because unicorns are not in the same ontological category as God. For one, you could claim to be agnostic towards unicorns, and with respect to that, there's no need to falsify it because you simply don't. You don't hold either proposition that is either true.
You know, the interesting thing though is that he's not even capable of understanding the fact that, okay, there might be a category difference there, but consider the category difference. A unicorn is something that people can picture in their head. It's conceptually simpler because it's based on things that we can prove exist in actual reality.
Yeah.
The notion that there is a horse with a horn is not that, that's not that big a leap. Maybe something like that exists. Now, does it have magical powers? Does it cause the sun to rise and to rise and set? Whatever. Any of the magical stuff in it, yeah, now you're getting going somewhere weird. But the God that they're trying to define, they'll say, oh, it's an immaterial mind. And then when you push back on that and say, or not you per se, Michael, but others have kind of pushed back on this with kind of theory of mind arguments, like, well, that God's not, a mind should be instantiated by something saying that it's immaterial. That doesn't sound like any mind that we know about. No, well, I'm using the term mind there analogically.
Yeah,
like,
and that's
okay.
And that's one of the funny things that they'll say, because I've said to other believers before, like one of the reasons I don't believe that that this ultimate mind, quote unquote, just mind exists, is because like, to the best of our knowledge, the mind is what the brain does, right? So we need a brain to have a mind, and that gets thrown. It's like, oh, you're just I forget what fallacy they've tried to say that I'm using when I say something like that, but it may be the no black swan, like, oh, because you haven't seen it, that means it doesn't exist. So
yeah, what they fail to understand about that in terms of it's still rational to believe that all swans are white.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the problem that these guys seem to have with it. No, then you're irrational because that's the problem with no. It's still rational to believe that all swans are white, probabilistically.
Yeah, and when I see the black one, then we'll know I was wrong.
Yeah, right. And then you can revise it. The fact that, oh wait, you can revise something, that means you never knew any. You didn't know shit. Like, no, that's that's not right.
That's one of the wonderful things about science, right? The fact that the conclusions are provisional, right?
Yeah,
we can know more. You can't revise the Bible.
And the whole idea behind getting to the deductive arguments that they want to construct, you're using inductive logic anyway, right? Because it's a probabilistic calculation. You're inferring God from your subjective experience. Yeah. That's part of the mystery to begin. Why am I here? Why is there something rather than nothing? All those kinds of things are based on inductive processes going on. And these guys usually just want to, kind of toss that out. Darth has been telling people that his arguments are a combination of deductive and inductive, but he's not framing them right. if you're being super charitable, like, yes, yeah, you're kind of starting with these kinds of inductive arguments about probabilities and regularities in the world. Where do you get this regularity in the universe from? That's an appeal to a kind of inductive logic, right?
Yep.
Like we see these things ordered. Now, other people have tried to argue with them and say, like, on a scale, on a universal scale, it could be that the patterns that we're seeing, they seem pattern-like, but it's only due to an issue of our point of view due to scale. And he doesn't understand that. so then that goes nowhere. But he's like, okay, well, I can appeal to the fact that there seems to be regularity to the world. How is anything regular when everything should be chaotic? Oh, God.
Yeah.
So, like, okay, so induction is good. Inductive logic is good for them to begin to set up, the beginning of defining the God. Once they've defined it into existence and they can squirm that into a syllogism, they somehow think that, by magic or some kind of I don't know, sacred right that makes it real. And it's like, that's not how any of this works. Sorry.
Yeah. It's just, because reasons.
Yeah, because reasons. Yeah. And I was using rationality, which God gave me, and I was using reasons, which God gave me, to use this logic, which God gave us. So it can't be false. Like, you've just assumed God in every fucking thing that you did to prove that God is necessary for every fucking thing that you did. Everything that you did was question begging. All of it.
Well, but Jefferson, you have to remember Romans 1.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Because Paul can't be wrong.
Yeah.
For any Christians listening, Paul was probably bipolar. That's right. Come get me. Not that there's something wrong. I'm not trying to go after him because, I'm trying to, like, punch down on people with mental illness. I'm just saying, if you were bipolar back then, you might be the kind of person that saw, say, people who were executed by the Roman Empire magically appear to you on the road somewhere.
Yeah.
Just saying.
True or false? Okay.
Okay.
But you just told me you positively believe that God does not exist.
No, that's not what I said. I said gods don't exist.
Yeah. Is God as I've defined it? Is God as I've defined it in the category of gods?
I'm not sure, because I don't know. I don't know very much about this God.
Do you believe
for some more properties?
Do you believe God as I've defined it does not exist? Do you believe that God as I've defined it does not exist?
Yes, I believe that God, as you have defined it, does not exist.
Okay, good. So, that whole thing was just a waste of time. You do believe God does not exist. Okay, so God does not exist because?
So which one?
The one we just defined 5 seconds ago.
Yeah. The reason I don't believe that God exists is because we don't have a way to falsify it. That which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence, Robin. If you have capacity, so allow me to ask you a question. Do you have any capacity to demonstrate that the God you have posited exists?
I do, but I want to point out that you just made a fallacy of reasoning.
It's a good question, and I love the dodge. Like, oh, I can do that, but first I have to point out that you're wrong again about something.
If you had the answer to the question that has plagued humanity since humanity started, you'd give it.
Right, and you wouldn't put it on pause to tell the person that asked you the question,
exactly. Oh, my soul is on the line.
Exactly. Oh, they've given up on that a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's not about you are I think the way that they justify this is that when they're having a conversation like this with you, he comes in there with the assumption that you will reprobate to whatever extent he believes in that particular theological dogma, and that the best thing that he can do here, and I really do think they believe this, it's extremely vain and it's all about pride. It's about making you an object lesson to anyone else that might follow in your footsteps. Like, if I can scare people into not wanting to talk to Christians, they can't even begin to form an argument to combat it, right? Like, this is, JRobin does not want to be a philosopher. He does not want to be a preacher. He wants to be a cop. And he wants to arrest people and convict them and sentence them to death in the name of God.
Fair.
That's what he wants. That's what gets him hard every morning. So
I didn't need that visual. Thanks so much.
I met it in kind of a hard psychologically, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
My last name is Spatchcock, so I'm going to try to work in some entendre. Yeah, sorry.
You just appeal to it's the appeal to ignorance fallacy, which
No,
is that if something has not been proven Yes, it is, because I asked you, God does not exist because, and then the line of reasoning you just gave to me is that because you have not been shown evidence of its existence. Therefore, right? Because so essentially, God does not exist because you have not seen evidence of God's
This is so bad. I don't know how many. I'll just let this play out a little bit more because I think it says more.
existence. It doesn't follow from the fact that you have not seen evidence, or you haven't seen, a rationale for God's existence, that therefore God does not exist. It doesn't follow.
No, but one can make a rational decision based on whether or not they think one exists, whether or not one believes that one exists. I do not.
Robin has already shown I have no rationality.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I forgot about that part. I forgot that I automatically rejected that as stupid. So. But this claim here, like I love I think he really thinks that he's being edgy here. This like it doesn't follow that just because you don't have evidence for its existence that means that it necessarily follows that it doesn't exist. You're right. He's absolutely right. But you're asking me about whether or not I believe it's true, and it does not make sense for me to assume the existence of something that's being asserted to exist by someone without them presenting evidence of it too. This is just as bad. Like, I mean, I marvel at how he fails to get this. Like, yeah, you're right. I should not assume that it doesn't exist because I haven't seen evidence that convinces me, or maybe there is an absence of evidence for it. I also should not believe that it exists because of that absence of evidence.
Yeah,
that's weird. And that seems to be what he wants to do. Like, well, shouldn't you hold it as a possibility in your head? Yeah, I should. But why would I be convinced it's real? I can't help what I'm convinced by.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, and I get to that. I get to that in just a second in the conversation. But there's that saying, right? Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence.
Yeah,
I disagree with that. I think it, especially when you're talking about the Christian God. So it may not necessarily be the case that in all instances, absence of evidence is evidence of absence. But in the case of a Christian God, I think it is.
Well, I would agree with you there, especially when they affirm that the revelatory aspect of that God is necessary. Then that's a real problem, right? And then the only thing that I think then JRobin would retreat into, oh, well, there's plenty of evidence. You're just rejecting it. There's evidence of God.
We're all looking at the same evidence. We're just coming to different conclusions.
Yeah.
As Ken Hovind would say.
You're 100% right. You are 1,000% right. It doesn't follow that the God you have posited doesn't exist. But this God is unfalsifiable. Is this God? Can you demonstrate it in some way? Like, here's one of the problems, Robin. Like, what happens if you convince me?
I hear it. Oh, this is good. Yep.
Do you have a non-fallacious line of reasoning then? Because you just admitted that this was a fallacious line of reasoning.
I'm asking you a very serious question, Robin. What happens if you convince me that there's a God?
I don't even know what that question means.
Sorry, I don't mean to pause that, but oh God, I don't know. Okay, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he is kind of thrown off by.
Can I check in with you? I was speaking clearly at that point, wasn't I?
It came through clear for me.
And I was speaking English, which seems to be the language we're both communicating in.
Ostensibly, yep.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
I was just checking myself there.
Simon's got dodge. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'll explain. The problem is right now is that all you've argued for is this deistic universe farter that has gone off to play tiddlywinks. Okay.
I haven't argued for anything. I've only defined the term.
I've argued. Yeah, I haven't argued for anything. I've defined this thing as existing, and I want to know why you're saying it can't be the case. Like, and you've already answered, like, well, that's what you've defined is not falsifiable. And now he's like, no, it is. You need to falsify it. Like, what? Like, okay, so your argument is I've defined this thing into existence, and I need and it's necessary in order for you to make the claim that it doesn't exist rationally, you have to provide a falsifier for it. And your response is, well, there isn't a falsification for that. That thing is not falsifiable. I'm not making an argument.
Yeah. Therefore, and don't leave out the most important part. I'm irrational because of that.
You're irrational because of it. Yeah. Oh Lord, this Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was listening to this while this was playing in the background at work, there were a couple. I was glad sometimes when some phone calls came in to distract me because I would mute it, and I'm just like, okay, JRobin is really messing with my head this time because he's really dodging all over the place.
Yeah.
God, okay, all right. So this is the God we're talking about. Now the problem is the questions you're asking me, and you're trying to say that, oh, I'm being irrational. Robin, here's my question, and here's the problem. And I think it's a bigger problem for you than for me. Here's the problem. What if you convince me? What if all of a sudden I have a could have had a V8 moment, and I'm like, oh my, oh, what? He's right. There has to be a God. And all of a sudden, I come over to your side. And all of a sudden, I start to believe that there's a God. Now, here's the bigger problem, Robin. What happens if, for some reason, technology breaks and our conversation gets cut short today? And for whatever reason, I'm not able to connect with you again for a period of time. And the next person I talk to is Khalilullah, who you're probably familiar with on Clubhouse. And you've already convinced me through what you believe is your line of reasoning that a God exists. But Robin, he's the next person I talk to. And all of a sudden, I accept Islam and I become a Muslim. Now, you're a Christian, right? And in at least in my mind, and you'd have to maybe tell me if I'm wrong in some way, but because you've not fulfilled your Christian obligation under 1 Peter 3:15 and given a witness for the faith that lies within you, you've now put me in a position where I have become a Muslim. And I think that's a bigger issue for you than it is for me. So so the question is, honestly, if you want to be so vague about the God that you don't even believe exists, what happens if you convince me?
Yeah, Mike, you're being diversionary right now. I made it clear earlier that at the onset of the conversation, you invited me to critique your worldview. You did not initially. You didn't call me, to ask me about what I believe.
So you roboted.
You're the guest.
Yeah, you roboted a bit.
Am I better now?
Yep.
Am I better?
Yeah, that's better.
I love this long. It takes him a long way to say, look, I'm going to give you I'm going to bring what I bring, and if you don't like it, it's your fault for asking me to be a guest on your show. Like this, this is really weird.
Yeah, and what's funny is conspicuous by its absence is addressing what I asked him in any way, shape, or form. It's like, had he, like, I mean, and it's a serious question. And if there are any Christians that are watching this now or that come back to watch this later, what I would say to you is, be more honest in your interactions with people, because the situation that I put forth as a possibility could happen. And like I said to Jefferson before we went live, I think you're in more trouble than I am if we're both standing before God. And you argued from Vaguetown, USA. And now I believe in a deistic God. Khalilullah converts me to Islam, and we're both standing there, and it's Yahweh. And I'm like, he didn't do his job. I think the Christian is in more trouble, personally.
Yeah, and I think that hypothetical is kind of interesting. The fact that he wants to duck that, like, I don't know how they get around this. But again, I do. I think my previous example where you're being used as an object lesson to scare others, or to convince them, look at how badass the Christians are. They can't be stopped. That kind of thing. We're big. We're bad.
Who is looking at this and saying, "Wow, what a badass Christian"?
Guys like him.
Okay, all right. Asked and answered.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very small selection, but it's the kind of guys that might be like, listening to guys like Darth Dawkins. It seems to me that being Christian is the Chad move. Then that's alpha. you know, but if they're using those words, they've gobbled up an enormous. They've got more problems than just just some religious convictions or an absence of religious convictions. So,
Right.
But yeah, no, I think this is to appeal to the kind of like weaponized bullshit artists that Darth Dawkins and Tone Loc. But I mean, it does appeal to them because there's DD, Redefined Living, Tone Loc, JRobin, Praise I Am. Although Praise is more amenable to that because he shifts. He's more of a chameleon. Smokey Saint, even though he disagrees with a lot of those guys on like young Earth creationism and stuff like that. But he's the same kind of guy. This sort of like firebrand blowhard type.
Matt Yester's another one.
Yeah, Matt Yester. Quite a few of them are like that, and a lot. And I mean, and it goes all the way up to even people that are kind of in mainstream evangelical Christianity, at least down here in the U.S. Jeff Durbin is very much like that. And
I trolled him for a little bit, trying to get him, and I asked him some questions, and yeah, he ghosted me like Swayze, man.
Oh yeah, I bet. I bet.
I thought that like, who am I that he's going to answer? But I mean, I would have thought that a Christian would want to do that, but obviously not.
Yeah. Do you have evidence that it's even possible to be a good person without God or the Bible? Yeah, there's actually stories. There's stories. There's stories about good people in other holy texts.
Yeah.
There are accounts of people of other faith traditions doing good things. There are accounts of people doing things that we would say are morally good, and they're not acquainted with Christianity in the slightest. So yeah, I mean, there's too much evidence for me to just narrow it down to one example. That's a dumb.
Yeah. It reminds me of I forget who said this now. As soon as I say it, you're going to spit the person's name out who said this. But you know, left to their own devices, good people do the best they can. Bad people do the worst they can. But to get someone good to do something truly bad, you'll need religion. And I believe that to be not universally true, but overwhelmingly true.
Yeah, I made the sign of an H across my chest.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Cyrus the Great gets some good press in the Bible. Yeah, but because he's mentioned in the Bible, you need the Bible to know that what Cyrus did was good. You couldn't evaluate that on your own. So,
yeah.
Frodo is a good person. I'm waiting for Felix to come back with J.R.R. Tolkien was a Christian. I don't know if he was or not. I think he might have been a deist.
I have no idea.
Anyway, by the way, for anybody that's punching on Felix Rodriguez, unless he does something like incredibly hateful or something, or starts engaging in some weird hate speech, there's really no reason to time him out. I mean, because if all he's going to do is, I've seen what he's doing. He's just asking, kind of constant questions, but just, he's a nuisance, but I don't know if that's really bannable yet. Now, if he starts spamming stuff Otangelo style in there, have at him. You know, people that try to use live chat to publish a blog post are weird.
When I joined the stage, when I joined on here, what you invited me to do was to critique your worldview. You said, okay, the floor is open. You can ask me questions.
I love how he's laying out the rules for talking to him while he's a guest in your place.
Well, again, just by being charitable, like, please start. And all of a sudden it's all about, me being on the defense. But that's the whole thing, right? Like the power that the people of this JRobin and his ilk have is, as long as you can keep me backwards on my heels, you can get somewhere.
This is the equivalent of you having JRobin over to your house and saying the words, "Please make yourself at home," and he steps into the house and immediately calls 911 to accuse you of trespassing.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was going to say shit's on my floor, but
yeah. Sorry, Jay. I mean, have Adam in the conversation. Engage with him if you can. If he just ignores you or just continues asking those goofy ass questions, just
don't mute him or time him out though, because then he goes back to his crybabies and said they wouldn't let me talk.
Yeah. Let him. If all he's going to do is fire blanks into the live chat, I mean, let him go. If he starts firing those things with like racial epithets or something, then drop that banhammer arm.
Yeah, like I've got like my whole thing is is, like, anything that can be deemed as hate speech. That's my hard no. That's my hard no line.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. My that one, and then like that Otangelo thing where he would copy pasta bricks of stuff in there just to take up as much space, and like that's very passive aggressive, and people would time him out for that. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine, do that, because that's obnoxious. Don't do that. People are trying to have a back and forth and keeping an eye on the video and watching that. Now they've got to scroll through swaths. I maxed out the comments so that I could post something that you could find on my blog post.
Sure.
Yeah. That kind of stuff I think is just passive aggressive.
So I think we're about to get into Christianity here.
And we are 21 minutes into the conversation, almost 22 minutes into the conversation, and JRobin's almost ready to start talking about Christianity. Here we go.
And that's what I did. You did not ask me to defend what I believe, so that's not what I'm doing. Okay? I'm asking you to defend the rationality of the position that you hold to. If you want to switch and go on to my position, then that's exactly what that would be. That would be a switch onto a different topic. Right now, we're not talking about my Christianity or my worldview. We're talking about whether or not you can rationally defend atheism, which is your position. Now, do you have the first line of reasoning you gave, which you conceded was?
Now he's actually getting a little bit less definitive, because if you're just defining your position, and I've answered this way too, I would define my position. The reason that I'm an atheist, and the reason I think most people are atheists, is that because they become convinced that the God that they believed in, or maybe most gods or some gods, maybe they were never convinced, but they are of the mindset that gods are made up. Right, that's usually the base. That it's not real. It serves as some kind of cultural. It's a cultural tradition. There's stories that people have made up. Right, that the God is man-made. Right, there's tons of evidence to support that.
Yeah, but then they just scream non sequitur, or it doesn't follow that the God doesn't exist.
Right, which to me is just weird. It's like, you wanted me to defend my position, and you think that I'm being irrational. I'm basing this on the fact that my own study of the Bible, like not going to church, I did that, right? And if you go to church, you're going to get it's all theology forward. But if you start studying the Old Testament and New Testament from, say, a college textbook, and it doesn't have to even be from like one of the big demonic secular Satanist colleges, but it's something from an accepted scholar of a school of divinity that is respected, say a John J. Collins or somebody like that. And you read that kind of stuff, you're going to get a very different perspective on the Bible. And if you go through that kind of literature and study that over time, there's lots of evidence in there that could lead somebody reasonably, rationally to the conclusion that these religions are stories. They're stories, and they're ways of explaining big, either cultural or historical things that happen to a society, to a culture, and kind of put them in the confines of this. But the Jewish tradition, it's the Israelites wrestling with God, essentially. They have good times, they have bad times. It's their history is revelation of their relationship with their deity.
Yeah, one of the best things I ever heard for it was, it's not my original argument, but I've used it several times, is, throughout history, there were thousands of things we used to attribute to gods, right? A good crop, a bad crop, fertility, thunder, lightning, all these other things. And as we learned things, we learned, oh, okay, warm and cold air masses coming together. Oh, that explains that. And so we cross off Zeus or Thor in that, and we go down the line. And you can find thousands of examples of gods, of things we used to attribute to gods. But the reverse has never happened in the history of history. There was never something we had a naturalistic explanation for that we actually like, oh, it actually turns out that was God. And I'll say it to people all the time. They were like, oh, no, everything is evidence of God. Stupid.
Yeah, right. Yep. Yeah, no, that's a good point, and it's one that I usually will bring up too, because it just seems to me like God is always something that's defined at the edge of human understanding. Like you said, there's a natural phenomenon that we can't explain. It must be God doing it, whether it's the weather or earthquakes or volcanoes. How do magnets work? And then once we have a naturalistic explanation, all of a sudden it becomes mundane, and then attributing it to God. What more Christians have done more and more is just put that in a bucket of, oh yeah, we do have an explanation for how magnets work and how the weather works. Ain't God grand?
Exactly,
and then to appeal to something, and to appeal to his magnitude, they just now have pushed it so that now God, instead of being the God of the sky, the God of the seas, the God of the rumbling earth, it's the God of rhetorical arguments that don't have a definitive answer.
Once we work out origin of life, where else is he going to hide?
You know, that's a good. I've often wondered about that. If we get more than a hypothesis about abiogenesis, but we get a working theory,
Yeah.
that's
What's left?
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
left?
I don't. Yeah, I really. I both I welcome and fear that day because I think it will happen. It may not happen
Yeah.
in our lifetime, but
Yeah.
yeah. When
It
it
could be a
does,
fucking holy war or some shit. People are gonna like, it's, oh, this is end times. This is the Antichrist. Grab your swords, or in this case, your AR-15s, and start mowing people down.
yeah, yeah. Especially when we find out, like, yeah. Well, the thing that I'm really concerned about it would be like we find out what did it, and then we find out more about the circumstances around it, and it changes and the naturalistic explanation isn't like, man, it was such a roll of the dice that life happened to happen on Earth. It was like, no, it had to. Like there are people in that there's that kind of leaning in something like it might actually not be such a random thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be weird that life, that there's not many planets like Earth where life can happen this way, but given what Earth is, where it's distance from this sun and all those conditions and everything, I mean, within that range of life happening, it's like it was inevitable that some form of life was going to happen here.
Yeah.
So
and because we can only map this much of the sky, probabilistically, there could be thousands. Like from Contact, right? There could be millions of civilizations out there.
Yeah, it's just one of these things where I think it's a failure of their imagination. Like, and that's one of the things I don't like about the fine tuning argument. Like, well, God must have made it and designed it with these parameters and these stressors because this is the only way life would happen. I'm like, that doesn't really convince me. I think life might be more resilient than that.
I've said the same thing. Like if you had 10 dials, right? And if you look at our universe, they're all tuned to, numbers 1 through 10. But if you turn them all randomly and they all end up in different numbers, you might have something. It may not be us, but you still have something.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Just wouldn't be us. And I like what Lawrence Krauss said about fine tuning. He's like, well, he's like, as a scientist, it seems like the universe was finely tuned for black holes.
Yeah.
So, which is fucking scary. But yeah.
All right, let me load this back up here.
It was a fallacy. It was a fallacy, the appeal to ignorance fallacy. Do you have a non-fallacious line of reasoning for the falsity of God?
So I think what we're doing here, sorry if you heard that, that's just me, someone send me a text. So sorry, I just lost my train of thought for a second. I looked at the text and I shouldn't have looked at the text. Okay, so what we've got here is, I think, from that famous movie line, is a failure to communicate. Okay, you are suggesting that because I can't offer you a defeater for your unfalsifiable claim, that in some way I'm being fallacious. Okay. In the interest of getting past our very first question, I will concede to you that when it comes to the God that you have posited, I do not have a defeater for it. Could we talk about what you believe now?
Okay, great. I just want to make sure it's clear then. So you don't have a falsifier for God, even though you hold to its falsity.
Not the one.
So is this an irrational? Is this an arbitrary? Is this an arbitrary decision on your part then to withhold belief in God and to hold to its falsity?
No, it's positively not arbitrary.
I think this is actually really disappointing from JRobin because he's in a long form conversation with you. You gave him that explanation, asked him that question, looking for that clarification, and he takes that, basically lay it out like, you're right, I don't have a falsifier for that God that you've defined, and uses that to get that cheap shot in.
Exactly. That's the mark. Okay, so score 1 point for me. Just so we'll move on now, but score 1 point for me.
Right, and it's like, okay, that's not a point. All you did was like somebody's like, admit, like, yeah, no, I don't know, like, and then he's like, well, you're rejecting that God. Like, he's so goofy about this. You don't have to. You could be like, yeah, that God exists. Now tell me how that God has anything to do with Jesus.
Yeah.
either way you go with it, it's like, no, I don't think that, I'm not inclined to think that that exists. Oh, so you're saying, you're admitting that you're irrational and you're just discarding that. Like, even if I said I thought it was, if I'm inclined to believe in a God, that a deistic God, there's just some ultimate creator that's the foundation for everything. Cool. Now, once you admit to that, then he's like, now part two is where I tell you I dropped the other shoe, and that's when we find out that it was revelational and a personal being all along. Like, okay, now so it's like, you didn't define God for me in the beginning. You gave me two of his properties. And then when you're like, so is there anything wrong with that? No, I guess not. I'm not inclined to believe in it, but okay, let's say that that being exists. Okay, so now it's got these things too. Like, now hang on a second, right? There's no way he can avoid doing that, and he's admitting it. At this point, he's moving into that. That's where he's going.
We're about to get there.
Yeah, this is such. I mean, he's. Oh, God, what a grifter. Okay, here we go. I'll stop ranting.
But
okay, then on what basis? On what basis do you hold to his philosophy?
Hang on. To be clear, what I am saying is, I do not have a defeater for the unfalsifiable God that you presented. Now, Robin, honestly, my mouth is watering to get into your beliefs, because that God for sure doesn't exist. So before you try to take this down another path, okay, I asked you if we could talk about your beliefs. Can we do that?
Yeah, sure. I think we've established the irrationality of atheism. So yes, we can talk about Christianity now. So what do you want to know?
So you are a Christian, yes?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Do you hold a particular denomination of Christianity?
No.
Oh, okay. How does it? Can you rationally defend your Christianity?
Yes, very easily, actually. It's very simple. The Christian worldview. It holds that it has certain properties, it has certain attributes that are necessary for intelligibility. So the way we can establish that God exists, one way we can do that, one is through God's revelation, but another way is through showing through transcendental reasoning and reductio ad absurdum that God is necessary with his properties for intelligibility. So God has certain properties. God is ultimate. He's eternal, omniscient, omnipotent, a mind, personal and revelatory, and always truth revealing. And these are necessary for intelligibility.
So it sounds like there's a lot more going on with this
Hang on. I'm about to point that out.
Okay.
Yep.
Without them, of course. Meaning
so
that
being
without
truth
them,
revealing. So I can't have intelligibility if I lie.
No, God grounds are so there are several things that God, being that which is metaphysically primary, is going to need to ground in order for us to have things like knowledge, for us to have things like rationality, intelligibility. God grounds our epistemology and an ontology. And so the fact that God is always truth revealing provides for us a basis for knowledge and for apprehension of the truth. A converse example or converse state of affairs is where we have something that's ultimate, like Descartes' demon or Allah, where they are said to be the chief of deceivers, or they're lying to you about everything that you think you or say you know, which just renders everything that you predicate upon, every belief or knowledge claim, completely and utterly arbitrary and meaningless, because you don't have a basis for them.
So
I like how he just kind of casually slips Allah into the same category as the Cartesian demon. That was kind of shitty. All right, I'll keep playing this.
The first thing I want to do is just kind of comment. Sorry, somebody has their hand raised. We're not bringing anybody up right now, so we may as well just put it down. I didn't disable hand waving, mostly because I don't know how to. But yeah, nobody's coming up. Thanks. Okay, the first thing I want to do is point out, and I want to be as charitable as possible, because the Christian God you described seemed to be a lot like the God you first described with some added properties. But I don't want to label you as being dishonest, but because what it sounds like you did was take the God you first proposed, which was unfalsifiable, and then place the Christian God label on that God and give it a few more properties.
Yep.
That's really what it sounded like you did, Rob.
It's
Sounds
not,
like it to me.
for one, I will gladly admit that yes, the Christian God has properties that are shared with the general conception of God. That's not controversial. That's not anything that's not obvious to anyone who's listening. Secondly, it's not a dishonest tactic because I didn't present to you my position about the Christian God or a defense for it when I presented to you the general conception of God. Let's be clear that the only reason I brought up the general conception of God is because you're an atheist, a global atheist who denies this general conception. So I could bring up to you the Hindu God. I could bring up to you Allah. You're an atheist, global atheist, so you'd have to deny all of them. So I could bring up to you any conception of God I want to because you hold to all of their falsity. Okay?
Oh, you're right. But there are lots of reasons why.
I wanted to give to you.
Sorry, finish.
I wanted to see if you can rationally defend your. That was the point of me giving you a general definition of God. I could have given you any other definition of God anyways because you're an atheist. The Christian God does have certain properties that are shared, right, with this other conception. But that's not relevant to honesty or dishonesty in any regard.
Oh no, and to be clear, that's why I said I didn't want to label you as dishonest. And if what I said seemed like I was doing that with a veil, I apologize. That wasn't my intention. But it is really I find this really curious. There seemed to be this group of people, and this is more just kind of moving away from questions for a minute, just kind of getting into a general discussion because I'm curious as to your thoughts on what I'm about to ask you. There seems to be this tactic by some to want to stay in generalities. And I shouldn't speak for anybody but myself, but there are lots of different believers that I've spoken to non-believers that I've spoken to who are surprised by this because when they're not speaking to an atheist or a non-believer, they will be really specific. They'll quote Bible verses. They'll talk about all kinds of different stuff. But then when they talk to a non-believer, all of a sudden they shed their beliefs, and they turn to this general conception of God, which to me, I won't speak for anyone but myself, but to me is super weird because they don't believe this God exists, this general conception of God. In fact, they believe the general conception of God does not exist. They have hyper-specific beliefs. Some like different branches and denominations mutually exclusive, right? Calvinism versus whatever you get to, you know already what I'm thinking. How do you feel about that as a Christian?
Yeah, this isn't well, okay. Yeah.
So
Talking about this is not an issue.
I'm purely curious.
What's that?
He's not at all interested. Like we've gotten away from, right? So this is like if JRobin wanted this conversation to be like blood sport, we're in between rounds right now, right? So we're both sitting on our respective corners, and he's not interested in that. He's like, when do we get back to punching each other in the face? It's like I ask him a question that he can't just go like, nah. He's not interested in that. What is this? Michael has already said several times he's not a global atheist. No, I am depending on how you want to use that term, I am a global atheist. I do believe gods do not exist, but it depends on which God we're talking about. And then I have very specific reasons why I think those specific gods don't exist, right? Christian God for sure doesn't exist. I'm a little more agnostic when it comes to Allah and some of the other gods, mostly because they're not prevalent where I live and I haven't studied them as in-depth as Christianity. But I do believe that gods don't exist. So I want to be clear on that.
Yeah, and I think that's what JRobin's actually having a hard time with, is that you can be the global atheist in the sense that you don't think that God's, but you have different reasons for thinking why some of them don't exist. Right. It doesn't have to be like they all don't exist because they fail this one particular, and that's what he wants to do, right? He wants to be like all the gods have this one central thing about them that they all share, and that is that they're a transcendent mind, creator of all. Like not all gods defined are like that. Not all gods that people have believed in were creator gods. He's just completely blowing that off. So yeah, it's bizarre.
Yep.
Yeah, what you're talking about is not an issue of being duplicitous or dishonest. That's not what the issue is. The issue is when we're talking about one conception of God. For example, let me give an analogy.
Sure.
I don't see how this is like. I wouldn't see how this is hard to understand. Like I think this is relatively simple or straightforward. Let's say
anytime JRobin says that he's going to provide an analogy, I always clench up a little bit. Like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Both of us,
yeah, we start to get into this. We start to get in when I start asking him more specific questions, and when I start asking him to nail down on the things he believes, then he starts going off in these different directions and claiming that I don't have the capacity to focus. Which is funny because so far I've only asked him a couple of very direct, specific questions. He hasn't answered any of them.
Right.
But I can't focus. So
right.
And I can't reason either.
Right. Yeah, he's already established for everyone that you're not rational. So yeah. I'm surprised he hasn't even my job here is done.
Believe that Superman does not exist. Both of us hold that Superman does not exist. Okay? I can ask you without any relevance, without pointing at all to my position, Michael, why do you believe Superman does not exist? Okay? Now, I don't have to believe that Superman exists in order to ask you that question, in the same way that I don't have to believe that the general conception of God is real in order to ask you that question. Okay, all I want to see is if you have yourself a rational defeater for the falsity of Superman. Okay, I have a defeater for the falsity of the general definition of God too. I don't believe that the general definition, strictly with those two properties, exists. I believe it does not exist. Me too. Okay, but I can. So both of us actually share a position. I have a rational defeater for that. I actually presented to you why the Christian God is necessary with its properties, and that the deficiency of that. And it seems like you either don't want to or are unable to actually deal with that argument for the Christian God. But yeah, I hold to the falsity of the definition of God I gave.
Sorry, which argument for the Christian God?
I presented the properties of God, and I just demonstrated that they're necessary. Well, I didn't actually show that they're necessary, but I made the claim, and it doesn't seem like we're actually getting into depth on that. It seems like we're talking about other people that are not in the room, other people that we're not talking to right now.
Oh no,
I don't even know, what is he talking about there?
So he's trying to say that, like, when he laid out all the properties, and he tripped over himself a little bit here, because he tried to say, oh, I laid out why God is necessary. I gave all these properties. And then he corrects himself. He says, oh, I know, I just made the claim. I didn't actually demonstrate it, which I give him kudos for, at least being that honest, right? He made a bunch of claims. God is all these things, but hasn't demonstrated them yet. And he doesn't, oddly enough.
Yeah, it's just, it's all very odd to me. Like,
and at this point of the conversation, like I'm serious. Like, I mean, I'm glad this Clubhouse is audio only, because there were large portions of the conversation where I was sitting with my head in my hands, like just like, and in my head I'm just like, it's like motherfucker, defend your beliefs. Like, come on, man. Like, let's get to what you believe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and he doesn't, and the closest that he's gotten is by trying to get into maybe, he starts adding into the Christian God definitions, right? And then when you've pushed back, I'm like, okay, well, it sounds like that's the same God that you defined before, but now with these additional, albeit necessary, qualities added into it, and he just seems to think that that's not, well, I don't, so. like the God that you defined before, if you believe that all the properties of the Christian God are necessary, and then you approach a skeptic with only two of the entire set and say, what's wrong with this God? Someone can just tell JRobin, that's not the God you believe in. I've heard your conversations. You're lying right now, because those other characteristics, those properties are necessary in the existence of that God. If you want me to say, like, I think that there is an ultimate immaterial mind that created everything. Well, it's also personal, and nope, it's none of those things. It's actually evil, malevolent, capricious, and it lies all the time. Prove me wrong. Well, when we go to the Bible, no,
Yeah.
mine has nothing to do with the Bible. I don't, you can easily drive. I mean, anyone else can take the wheel and drive this car right off the cliff too. The fact that,
Yeah, and it is really interesting. And this is something that I say to, and I say it now in basically all of my interactions with Christians, it's like, talk about what you actually believe. And it's still massively conspicuous by its absence.
Yeah.
Throughout the entirety of this so far.
Yeah.
I asked you that question purely out of curiosity. Yeah. So like, okay. So, so as a Christian, so you believe, I just need to make sure that, because there are lots of, like, I've said this lots often, saying you're Christian is like saying you drive a car, right? So, I'll sometimes say, oh, you believe that, God is, the tri-omni God. And people say, oh, I never said that. And so I want to be crystal clear, on what you believe the Christian God is. So do you believe that the Christian God is a tri-omni God? And I'll define it, because, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not interested in misrepresenting you. So omnipotent, meaning kind of as powerful as logically possible, right? So this whole like this whole BS about, can you make a rock so big you can't lift it? Like, none of that garbage, right? Do you believe that the God you believe in possesses that property?
Sure. I like to put it in the sense that God has sovereign control over everything. But I'm sure that definition you gave would suffice.
Okay, and can do anything logically possible. Like, he can't make a squared circle, because of course that's stupid, right? But yeah. Anything logically possible?
I don't usually do this, but I have to. I want to address a deepity that I just ran into in the live chat. So Stephanie Tretton writes, would you ever say to a woman that says she loves you, prove it, would you? Love is enough, no proof needed, LOL. Okay. If I told you that my girlfriend told me this weekend that she loved me for the first time, and you're like, oh, that's great, right? And then you found out that I didn't have a girlfriend, I was lying about her the entire time. Or if you knew somebody to always be single, said, my girlfriend told me, or my boyfriend told me that he loved me. Oh, really? Who are you dating? Oh, it's no one you know. It's
I'm in Niagara Falls.
It's someone from my company, but they work at another office outside the country. You wouldn't have met them, right? Like, so.
Sure.
Okay. Omniscient, meaning has perfect knowledge of past, present, and future events.
Yeah, I would say something like God has like mental apprehension of all things that are true, that can be known, that are to be known. Yeah.
Okay, so past, present, and future is fair.
Yeah.
Okay. And then some people add omnibenevolent. Do you believe God is all good?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, by omnibenevolent, I take it that when I use the term, I'm saying that God is the foundation of all moral truth, and that there is no moral truth outside of God.
Okay. So yeah, because I've talked to some Christians that say that they don't actually believe that God is omnibenevolent. Because they'll, was it one thing I heard them say? Because God is also perfectly just, right? And sometimes being just means not necessarily being all loving. Would you agree with that? That's just something I've heard other Christians say.
Yeah, well, the definition of that's why the definition of omnibenevolence oftentimes goes ill-defined. And so this is the way I phrase it, is the way I would put it, that God is that way. I wouldn't say that love is incompatible with justice at all. I would say that actually love is perfectly consistent with justice. But those are.
Yeah, JRobin actually has to be kind of careful there, because the people most likely to have an issue with love and justice being in the same kind of category are other Christians. A lot of Christians seem to have a real problem. I don't. I think, the notion of justice and making sure that people, excuse me, sort of get what they deserve or whatever. That's not necessarily an absence of love. But I've heard Christians say that that's just because God has to also be just too. He has to balance out the love with the just. Like, do you think love is just kisses and hugs and cookies and everything pleasant? Like,
Depends
I
on
have
the kind of cookie.
Oh, right, yeah. If there's cranberry almond things, yeah, that's
Yeah, fuck that.
clearly, that's clearly spite. I want white chocolate macadamia, and I want them now.
Seriously.
Yeah, I always kind of wonder about talking about the omnibenevolence thing because, and I hate to say this because it's probably, and this will piss off any Christians that are listening. Christians typically, not all Christians, have an extremely superficial definition of love. And when they get into discussions about God's love and God's benevolence, his loving nature, you quickly start to see how superficial that definition is. And so normally the omnibenevolence thing is also moral perfection. Either way you take it to be, omnibenevolence is usually seen as God can't do anything morally wrong. He's the grounding of everything that is moral.
Yeah. Titus 1 says he can't lie, all that stuff. Yeah.
There's massive problems with that. There's lots of contradictions because one of the things these guys will say is that, well, he doesn't have to actualize all good things all the time. Other people would say, no, actually, by definition, he must. So, I mean, there's lots of different directions those arguments can go. Omnibenevolence is one of my favorite property disproofs to tangle with because it's so easy to start blowing up. It's very tenuous. All right, we'll push out a little bit more, and we've hit the 1 hour 35-minute mark. So you want to go a little bit longer here? I know you've got a
no. We've still got a solid half hour to go for sure.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know who you talk to, so I can't really speak much on that matter.
Well, there's been lots of people, like everybody from like Ken Hovind and Matt Slick to even less impressive people. But yeah, and like I said, that's why I want to get a little bit of clarification, right? Because there are. Like I said, there are, like, do you consider Jehovah's Witnesses to be Christian?
No.
All right, but they consider themselves to be Christian, right? And that's why I wanted to get an idea of what you meant by Christian, right? So then, are you a Trinitarian, like one God in three distinct persons, but one being?
Yeah. Okay.
All right. All right, good. So I think I have a general idea of the God you believe in. Yeah, that God totally doesn't exist, Robin.
I was just like, and there's like, yeah, fucking gauntlet down. Fuck you. That God doesn't exist. And it's and for anyone in the live chat that ever wants to set something up, I have no problem demonstrating to you that the Christian God is completely made up. But yeah, I was just like, I at one point, this is a little sliver of charity fell away. I'm just like, yeah, that guy's not real.
Yeah, I do want to point out, given the live chat is quite lively. When I said don't, I'm starting to reconsider my don't ban Felix Rodriguez policy, given what y'all are doing to that guy in the live chat. So hats off, slow clap applause.
I purposely never look at the comments, other because I'm a squirrel. I would just be like,
I just keep kind of looking back every once in a while, and I usually have a crawl playing, and what I'm seeing is they basically have decided to all, and it's a really organic process. Like he kept saying demanding evidence. It was like he just kept responding. He was ignoring the questions people were asking him, just responding with this. Now everyone's asking him which God.
Yeah. You know what? If Felix, if you're paying attention to this right now, maybe Jefferson would be nice enough to set up a chat, and you and I can have a talk, and I can tell you how that God doesn't exist.
Yeah. And I don't know if Felix has ever. I don't know that he's ever engaged in any kind of either one-on-one or anything that's ever been done live on YouTube. I know I think he's been in rooms and stuff before. I think he is frequently over at Praise I Am's channel. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe he saw me there last night. I don't know.
Oh yeah. Felix, give a thumbs up if you saw Micheal and Gavin in their debate last night. I haven't. I need to watch it. I'll be watching that later. Anyway, here we go.
Especially the one that represented in the Bible. Like there's like that God completely doesn't exist. And I'll give you my 3 prongs as to why I am convinced that God doesn't exist. The first one is the Bible's stupid. The Bible is so wrong in so many ways.
right out the gate with a kick between the legs. First of all,
Yeah.
the Bible's stupid. Like,
Yeah.
all right. That's not the angle I would take, but no, that's definitely a tack that you can take.
Completely ridiculous. And I know I see Uri down there. He's probably either punching his microphone or wanting to punch me. But yeah, like there are too many absolute falsehoods in the Bible. Things we know for sure aren't even possible. This is a problem because the Bible says that all scripture God breathed and suitable for teaching and instruction in all things, right? And so, yeah, it just can't be. The Bible is just so clearly made up, written by people who didn't know any better. The second thing is, and this is something that I've heard other people talk about, so I want to be clear in what I say, and it's the evidential problem of evil, not the logical problem of evil. I don't necessarily think there's a logical problem of evil. And in fact, what you said a moment ago, I think I agree with. Being a parent, I know that sometimes I have to be harsh while still applying justice is maybe the right word, but justice, right? So I think I agree with you on that point. But the evidential problem of evil. 1 John 4 says that God is love. 1 Corinthians 13 defines love as kind and patient, etc. You know, that verse that gets read at weddings and all that stuff, right? That is incompatible with what we see in the world. So that's a problem. And the third is science, and primarily evolution. Evolution is a fact. It just is. People need to get over that. It is the most I think it's the most established theory in all of science.
Mickey D, I would have gone with the Bible is not a history book or a science book, right? But
Yeah,
Michael,
way
Michael
way more charitable than me at this point. Yeah, I've said these things too many times to too many people, and sometimes my Canadian fails me, and I have to go for, you know, like as he said, that kind of kick in the slats. Mark, I don't have a channel. I'm too lazy, and I have a face for radio. So I do a podcast, and maybe Jefferson will be nice enough to put a link in there. But yeah, I do a podcast. I go on lots of other people's YouTube channels. But I don't have the Canadian Atheist. I think the Canadian Atheist has a YouTube channel, but don't go searching for content.
What was the best link for people to find that? Because I posted like a couple in the description from the last time. The last time you and I had a conversation. What was the better one? I can look it up while
That's the link.
just drop it in there. Perfect. Okay. Oh yeah, the one at WordPress. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. I will. I'll throw that down there then. Okay, let's keep going.
People will sometimes misuse theory for hypothesis, and that just shows they don't know what they're talking about. We know more about evolution than we know about gravity. And because going back to the Bible, you know, the Bible talks about, you know, dust man and rib woman, and all of the problems with genetics, where, you know, 8 people on an ark can repopulate a planet without the unfortunate side effects of a gene pool that's about as deep as a spoon, let alone going back to Genesis before, you know, where it talks about one man and one woman, which we know for sure never happened at all. So yeah, so those 3 things are why I am absolutely convinced that the Christian God of the Bible positively does not exist. The God you believe in doesn't exist.
Okay. Let's see here. I wrote them down, the argument. So let's see here. Evidentiary problem. You said the evidentiary problem of evil.
Yeah, you
Can you render
believe
that argument
evil's
for me,
pretty
please?
evident in the world, right?
Yeah. Can you render how the existence of evil entails the falsity of God?
Well, yeah, I gave you 2 pieces from the Bible, right?
Yeah, none of that actually entails that God doesn't exist. If you believe it,
I didn't say that. I didn't say that alone. This is a cumulative argument, Robin.
Okay,
Unless-
so the
unless
evidentiary problem of evil that you're presenting here does not falsify God.
Sorry, just taking
The Christian God.
taking a sip of a drink. No, like I said, it's a cumulative case. So you started in
Yeah, Jefferson will pause for just a second.
Okay.
And so he's choosing to hyper focus in on this, and this is something that some of his cohorts do, right? They'd be like, oh, there's that's why I specifically said the evidential problem of evil, not the logical problem of evil, because
Right.
I don't think there's a logical problem of evil. But the evidence of evil that we see in the world is incompatible with the God as defined in the Bible.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm very, very specific. And he's trying to now twist that a little bit.
Yeah, I think what these guys fail to realize, I think that a lot of people, I think there's two kinds of things that skeptics kind of look for: the logical problem of evil and the evidential problem for suffering, right? Because if you try to do like an evidentiary problem for evil, you end up getting kind of confined into this like semantic game of, well, what do you mean by evil? And all this evil. What's this evil that you're talking about? I think evil in terms of the logical arguments and the logical problem for it exists if you're trying to define a God as a morally perfect being or whatever. You can kind of work out those things in that. I don't know that I agree. I don't know that that's all that convincing for people, that's going to sway people to not believe in God. But the evidentiary problem for suffering, which is predicated on the idea you got this God is defined at least mostly good, and yet there's it's not that suffering is a possibility. It's why is there so damn much of it?
Yeah. And it's funny. So, and like, I'll say evil. Sometimes I say suffering when I'm talking to people, but sometimes I just say evil. And if people want to get so pedantic about arguing over the definition of words, I'm like, well, like suffering's evil, right? Like, especially when it's caused by this omnipotent being. Right.
Yeah.
And so if you just want to like argue the kind of the silliness of words like that, I think it shows a weakness in the point you're trying to get across.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, and I think the only reason that's interesting, and I mean, engaging in the semantics is if you're going to get into the philosophical arguments, if somebody's trying to set up a logical syllogism arguing the problem of evil or the problem of suffering, like, okay, then you're going to want to make sure that your terms are defined and maybe you argue for those in the precepts. But I think for most people, the one that tends to be convincing, Bart Ehrman has even said it's one of the reasons that he lost his faith was not because of the logical problem of it. Nobody showed him a syllogism and said, hey, 2 and 2 don't make 4 here, so stop believing in Jesus. It was the problem of so much suffering in the world.
Yep.
Right.
And just superfluous suffering.
Yeah. Exactly.
You want to talk about the Bible a little bit?
Yes, we can. Okay, so the Bible. So what can you be more specific about that?
Oh yeah. Well, so okay. Actually, I left one out. This is a good one. I usually give this one a little earlier. So if you are correct that God is omniscient, then Genesis 6 demonstrates that God, then there's a direct contradiction. Genesis 6, before God floods the world, which of course we know is a fairy tale, it says that God regretted making people, I'm paraphrasing, just before he decided to etch-a-sketch them all out of existence. And omniscient.
Can you go to the verse, please?
So, I think it's Genesis 6. I can't remember exactly. I have to look it up. But
I know what you're talking about. But can you please go to the verse actually, so we can read it together?
What he tries to do here is just argue over the language of it.
Well, he knows better.
There are versions that say regretted. I think there's one that says remorse, something like that. But anyway, you'll hear more as we go forward.
Have that open right now. 1 second. Somebody play some music to keep us entertained. Hang on.
And just key up some bossa nova.
Yeah, there you go. It doesn't take long for it to get to it.
Man. I just have to go to Genesis 6.
Cue Jeopardy music.
Is the NIV okay with you?
I don't really like using NIV, but we're gonna actually get to the bottom.
It's the first one that came up.
Okay.
Is he an ESV man? I bet you he's an ESV guy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, in my experience, there are some Christians that are starting to lead away from KJV because of verses that are in like Genesis, because I think Genesis actually says regretted, but also because of Isaiah 45:7, where it says God created evil.
Yep.
And they for some reason they think calamity is so much better than evil. But yeah, it's it's like Ford, Chevy, Mazda, Toyota. Like, what version do you want? It's all this. It all says the same shit.
The thing that I find funny about that calamity evil thing, I've got a long argument for why that can't be the case, but they just sum it up. It's just like, well, no, he creates calamities. Like calamities, like acts of God. Can God hit a deer while driving his car? I don't think so. I don't think that sounds like what you guys like to call a category error.
And what the hell's so good about calamity?
Right. Yeah. He creates calamity. Like, well, here's what's going to happen. I'm so pissed off right now that something awful is going to happen. I don't know when and I don't know where, but maybe a mountaintop will blow or a big wave will drown a bunch of you. Something's going to happen. I create the calamity. Like, okay, so if you're not actively targeting a population with a comet strike, right, that would be God creating evil. But the fact that, well, God created a world in which our sin allowed for earthquakes to happen. So he's the creator of calamity, second, two steps removed. Like, oh, come on. How does Jesus?
Yeah, and it reminds me of Gabriel Byrne's portrayal of the devil in the movie End of Days, which was not a great movie, but anyway.
Oh no.
He says at one point, he's like, when something good happens, it's God's will. Something bad happens, he moves in mysterious ways. And it's just this excuse, this coverall excuse for everything.
Yeah,
it's just
I resented Gabriel Byrne for playing that because I thought the idea of the devil being portrayed by an Irishman played into a lot of anti-Irish sentiment. Sorry.
in the movie Stigmata, he played a Catholic priest.
True.
Right. So
True,
he can play both sides.
Multi-talent. I think he is quite Catholic. I think he was attracted to stories like that. So,
oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah. But I mean, well, this is totally tangential, but just for the audience too, which Satan's better, over the top Satan's? And actually, I don't know if the Gabriel Byrne's really that over the top. He played it a little bit more subdued, but Gabriel Byrne as Satan in what was that called? The Sixth
End of Days.
End of Days, and then versus Al Pacino as Lucifer in The Devil's Advocate.
Oh, that's good. That's a good one. I really liked both of those characters.
Yeah, because they kind of take a different track. Yeah,
you can't fault Pacino for anything. Fucking legend, right? But I also quite like Gabriel Byrne, so that's really good. They both do things that are like downright like malevolent in those movies. So I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to think on that. I'm gonna have to think about that.
I think End of Days wasn't that bad. No, I didn't say it was bad. Michael said it was not a great movie.
It was like it's
not a good. It's not a. I don't think by even by a lot of technical definitions, it is not a good movie. Parts of it are enjoyable. Like
parts of it are enjoyable. It's not the eye candy, the special effects are decent in it. But it's not award worthy, let's say.
Yeah. Well, he's coming right out of Inoculum Pacino all the way. Yeah, I like that monologue at the end. He's there are more people in law school right now. We're coming out. Guns blazing. Yeah, he's just flipping out. Yeah.
Yep.
Or his thing about like the sins. Like look, but don't touch. Yep. Don't taste. Don't swallow.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It was whoever wrote that was on their A game.
I think it was I think it's one of the Gilroys. Tony Gilroy. Yeah, he's been doing movies forever. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's one of his scripts. Yeah,
that was A game writing for sure. Hang on, just going through here. Okay, so I'm on Genesis 6 right now.
It's verse 7.
Sorry to continue with this. Fergus says neither was as good as the devil in Constantine. Peter Stormare was a good Constantine, or was a good Lucifer. I love the fact that Constantine called him Lou for short. Like they'd been to meetings together. The thing that but I don't know if anybody remembers this movie because it is not great. It's called The Prophecy with
Christopher Walken.
Christopher Walken and Viggo Mortensen. Before he was popular, he plays Lucifer at the end of that thing, and he is fucking scary. He has some weird line delivery in that. It is just bizarre. But it's great. Every once in a while, some of his lines, my siblings, if we're all hanging out together, if that topic comes up, they'll quote one of his lines at me, and I always just kind of give a shudder, like he's gross.
Yeah.
It's
I'm gonna
so
have to go back
creepy.
and rewatch those now.
Yeah. It's worth it to say, like, even if you don't watch the whole movie, find it when it's on streaming sometime. Just fast forward to the end until you see him perched on like a tree stump or something. That's when things get crazy. So
Cool.
This one is Genesis 6 verse 7. Okay, so yeah, I just want to make sure you had the verse ready, because we're actually, because this is not the first time somebody's tried to use this argument.
Right. So it just
against
so
me.
says there for people that are listening, they can't look it up right now. Basically, towards the end of this says, "For I am grieved that I have made them."
Exactly. Right. So the NIV will put it repent, right? Or not. The KJV puts repent. The NIV would put regret, and I don't know which verse you're looking at that says grieve, but yeah,
No,
the
that
actual
was
word.
NIV. That was NIV.
That was NIV.
Yep.
Where?
I got right here. Hang on. That's precisely what I pulled up.
In
Yeah,
chapter
Bible Gateway.
Yeah.
Genesis 6 NIV.
Yeah, no, it says the word there in NIV is regret. It's not. I don't see anywhere it says grieved. I'm familiar with what the NIV. That's why I don't like to use the NIV version, because they have a lot of instances where they will mistranslate certain words.
Do you have a preferred version?
I would like to. I mean, I normally just read the KJV. I'm not a KJV onlyist, but that's when I mean, if I'm just gonna pick up a Bible, I'm gonna read the KJV normally. But this,
Okay.
we're gonna get to the, because again, these are translations. So let's actually look at the actual word.
So okay, so I pulled it up because it's Genesis 6:6, and I pulled it up in one where it shows it's the verse in question, the word in question. And when you'd ask which version he preferred, almost all of them say something like regret.
Yeah.
So I don't know which version he would go to if he thinks that this isn't what's said in there, then he has a problem with almost every translation of this in every version of every Bible.
Yeah, and it really doesn't matter, right? As we're about to the bit of the conversation as it goes on.
Now he could go with the Breton Septuagint translation. Then God laid it to heart that he had made man upon the earth, and he pondered it deeply. Everyone else translates it as he was sorry that he made us, or he repented of making us, or he regretted that he made us, or that it grieved him that it made us, which is kind of all kind of the same thing.
Yep.
So yeah, this is not informative from JRobin. This doesn't matter.
Word. The actual word is I don't know how to pronounce it in the Hebrew, but they say naham or nacham. And the word there means simply just to be sorry, or to be grieved, right?
That's fine.
Or to regret.
Yeah,
I'm fine
he's
with
really
sorry.
picking over the word here.
Yeah.
So
and here's another thing. This is a pet peeve of mine. Like if you cannot translate a passage or sentence or a paragraph by zooming in on a word, looking it up in the original language, and then trying to look for its direct one of its direct English cognates, because that is not how translation's done. That's how transliteration is done. Transliteration leads to lots of problems. These guys try to do this all the time, and when they do it, it's clear that they don't understand how languages work. And I'm sure some of these guys have been through some school system where somebody sent them through some kind of foreign language. Maybe they never did, but you cannot, with the exception of a few languages that have lots of grammatical similarities with English. You can kind of do this and you might be kind of safe, but you don't do it with languages that are really, really different. And you certainly don't do it with ancient ones. You do kind of have to rely on the fact that the scholars that were interpreting that stuff were picking that and putting that in context because they're engaged in translation. And oftentimes what these kinds of armchair apologists want to do is try their hand at I can just get a concordance and look the word up myself, and then I can just put the English word in there, and look at the way it changes that meaning. That's transliteration. That
Yeah.
is not good scholarship. You're not a scholar. For JRobin and anyone else that continues to do that shit, knock that shit off. If you
Yeah,
want to translate the Bible, you need to go to school and learn ancient Hebrew.
Yeah, I spoke with Josh Bowen about this. I asked him about this not following this conversation, but I'd asked him about this in the past. And as Josh does, the great man that he is, he sent me like 4 articles on why you don't do things like that.
Right. Yeah. And actually, not to trouble you, but if you do happen to have those links still, could you send those? Email me those links sometime.
Absolutely, yeah, without question. I will do
I'd
that.
love to read, because I would love to read more on that, because I'm sure they go into a little bit more depth on that. But that's just what I know from what little bit I've studied from some introductory textbooks and my own language studies. You wouldn't do this. You wouldn't even do this with 2 modern languages. You should not do this with Japanese to English, or English to Japanese. You're not going to make any sense. It's the reason that they had those whole websites devoted to English, so-called. That's what they would try to say. Like Japanese, it was the Japanese people literally translate or transliterating English sentences or English sayings, or taking something that they would say, transliterating it word by word into something in English, and it just comes out, it's just total nonsense.
Yeah. And for anyone not familiar, Josh Bowen is an Assyriologist, he has his PhD, and speaks ancient fucking Hebrew. So he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. So yeah, I to this day I do not understand. Well, I do understand some of it. There's this idea. This is a Protestant thing, right?
Yeah.
Not to say that only Protestants do this in the Christian tradition, but this idea that, well, I can read the Bible by myself. I can homeschool my way, bootstrap my way through Christianity with this and a concordance and the internet. And it's like, no. At some point, you actually do need to defer to somebody who's an expert in that language. And if you're not an expert in that language, don't go pulling up your concordance and swapping words around and then trying to say, that's how people end up creating their own idiosyncratic translations of Bible stories.
Yeah, but therein is apologetics.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what the word is,
right?
And God is speaking about the relationship between him and his creation. What's the contradiction in saying that God is omnipotent, or sorry, God's omniscience is not compatible with God being sorry about about the state of creation?
How can you be sorry about something you knew was going to happen in advance?
Asking me a question is not an argument.
No, it's a legitimate question.
I could tell you I don't know, and it wouldn't follow from that therefore being sorry is incompatible with being omniscient.
It would imply that. Like, I guess they could go with the old thing where, well, no, God knew it was going to happen, and like someone who knows that their kid is destined for a life of crime and drug abuse, they're just going to kind of sit there and like, yeah, I mourn it, but what do you
sounds
do?
like he's trying to argue for the whole, permissive free will, permissive versus decretive kind of stuff, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, it also leads to the contradiction too for Christians. It's like, well, God has to give you the ability to choose these horrible things, otherwise he's a monster creating robots. And it's like, okay, so he wants you to willingly, and all your evil and decrepitude and nastiness, willingly choose to accept him, and then let the Holy Spirit into your heart, so the Holy Spirit will change their heart so that they'll no longer want to do the bad things anymore.
That's right.
Do you not see a problem with that? Like, he doesn't make monsters, but he does reprogram you monster.
Yes.
Like, what? Like this? Yeah, bizarre.
Sure.
Do you realize that? Okay, good. Sure, so how does it follow that being omniscient is incompatible with even being regretful, even if I were to accept that word?
I'm sorry that you don't. I'm sorry that you don't see it, but like it's really plain to see.
No, because all regret or sorry refers to is just the fact that you're unhappy about the state of affairs.
Okay.
So how does being omniscient?
But no state of affairs can happen without God.
Yeah.
Everything is contingent upon God, and now he's unhappy about something that was entirely contingent upon him. So that raises a lot of questions. I don't think he's understanding the entailments of what he's bringing up.
Entail the falsity of being sorry or grief stricken about something. I don't see it.
Sorry,
so maybe
you gacked out there. Sorry, you gacked out there on my end. Can you repeat what you said?
Yeah, I don't see how being sorry about a certain state of affairs is incompatible with you knowing that it's going to happen.
This actually kind of makes sense. I want to point this. Maya's got a little a comment. So his point is, just because I showed remorse doesn't mean I acknowledge my fuck up. That's consistent if you're a narcissist and if you believe God is too.
Yeah.
Right. You can feel bad about it, but it's not your fault. So this is starting to make sense. Like the ones that are the most hard-headed about this, like, oh yeah, things didn't turn out right, but that's not God's fault. That's your fault. Like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. So you're kind of like imagining yourself as God, and in your position, nothing is ever your fault. You're not responsible. You deserve all the credit, but
Yeah.
you don't accept any of the responsibility. Gotcha. Okay.
It's like those kind of people. It's like those kind of people, and I think everybody knows. Everybody knows someone like this, where regardless of the chain of events that you may have set up by your actions or inactions, when something bad happens to you, it's, I can't believe this happened to me again.
Right.
It's like all of, it's like the world is out to get me. It's like, no, the fuckers, they came and repoed your car because you didn't make payments for 11 months, man. It's like, this isn't anybody getting back at you, right? This is your things of you not doing things set this up. Oh, can't believe everybody's out to get me, man. Right? Like it's everybody knows somebody like that.
Yeah. I'm going to replace the pinned one. I had your podcast link pinned in there, but I've also put that in your I've also put it in the description, so it should be there for anybody that's interested. Michael's the link to web link for his podcast is in the description now, because I want to replace it with Simus's. I'm going to pin that JRobin is an omni incompetent.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I don't think we, as imperfect creatures, have the capacity to see that. But we don't have perfect foreknowledge, right? Robin, according to what you believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong. But
actually, I have to say that I'm sorry. For some reason, why did that time out? I did not want to time out, Simus. In fact, I was trying to highlight and pin his comment. Oh my God! How the hell did that? It deleted his messages too. Will it still let me? Yeah.
What'd you do?
Well, I'm still gonna pin the message. So, yeah, my apologies. I would reverse that, Simus. As far as I know, with YouTube, you cannot reverse a timeout. I did not mean to do that, Simus. I was trying to pin the comment that you made, and I guess the mouse pad must have slipped. Carlton, damn, Jeff yeeted Simus drama. Yeah, let's hope that doesn't turn into drama. My apologies, Simus. Yeah, 500 free spatch points for for Simus because I accidentally yeeted him.
But before God even thought about doing this, he already attended yours and my funerals, right? Like he already knew what was going to happen to you and I whenever it happens to us before it all started. Yes?
Yeah, I'm waiting for you to demonstrate how being sorry is incompatible with being.
I'm trying to, but
yeah, but you're asking me a lot of questions. Notice how.
Do you agree with that?
I don't need to answer your questions for you to present your, like, for example, we still haven't actually gotten to my argument for the actuality of God, right? I mean, I don't know if you just don't have a rebuttal for that, or if we're moving to a different issue, but like, I didn't ask you any questions when you asked me to present how I know God exists. I didn't ask you anything. I didn't say,
okay,
right? Yeah. Look, just present how it's the case that being sorry is incompatible with being omniscient.
So again, like I said, so if you have, okay, how can I put this better? So this is one of the reasons why I don't believe in the God you think is real. Like, again, it's in the same way there are lots of reasons why you think the God you think is real. There are lots of reasons why I think the God you think is real isn't real. This is one of those reasons, right? So it's not like, well, if you could show me somehow that being regretful is a problem for an omniscient being, you don't seem to think that it is, but it doesn't make sense. And not just doesn't make sense to me, Robin, but if you have a being that has perfect foreknowledge. This being knew before it happened what was going to happen. That's like taking your hand and putting a lighter under the palm of your hand and turning the lighter on, and then, oh man, I can't believe that burned my hand. Right? This being knew about
Actually,
it
well, to
in
use
advance.
that analogy, I could put my hand on the fire, knowing full well what's going to happen, and then it actually happened, and I could still be griefed about it. So you actually just defeated your own point. But let's be clear here.
What?
Yeah.
Was this a moment when you also had your head in your hands? Because I would have. Like, what?
Continually. At this point, I had my phone in between, like sitting on my desk, and I was just like this. Yeah, ongoing. We are unfortunately hitting the part, Jefferson, where I kind of have approached my hard stop.
Okay. All right.
And man, I can't believe we only got this far into it. Hopefully everyone has enjoyed this. I am perfectly willing to come back and continue this if you want to put a pin in it.
Yeah, we could do it. Yeah, I can schedule a part 2 if you want to do this. You want to maybe do this next week?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let's do it next week.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome.
But yeah, I apologize, but I have received a text from my wife.
No, I get that. And we've been on for we're 10 minutes past the 2-hour mark. So yeah.
Yeah.
No, if you got to go, you got to go.
So
and it's the weekend. I don't want to monopolize your time. So
no, but this is super fun. Hopefully everybody, again, I always try to go back later and look at the chat. Hopefully when you say it's a lively chat, I'm curious to go back and read some of it. Hopefully everyone has enjoyed it thus far. And I'm sorry to have to be the spoiler here that has to kind of take off. But
no, I'll just make kind of a mental note that we were at about the 48-minute mark here, and then we'll kind of pick up more or less where we were before, and maybe push through this a little bit more and get into the second one. There's a little bit of an overlap and see. But yeah, no, so far I think you brought up some good points with him, and I just don't. But I'm seeing kind of the usual stuff from JRobin, but also some. He's actually not been all that great with this. I think he's a little fixated in trying to score some cheap shots with you instead of just trying to engage you in a conversation.
Oh, that hasn't the best. That hasn't even started yet.
Oh God,
it gets worse.
Simus is back. No less than 1,000 cock points, please. Yep, there'll be 1,000, and they will be the cock points. That's the higher tier than the spatch points. Spatch points are just that's.
That's
I got to create an entire currency system now to make up for the fact that I just that I accidentally timed out Simus Funk.
Yeah, that's
so embarrassing.
That's cock points is alarming to me.
It does come out kind of weird. It's one thing to read it; it's another thing to say it out loud.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, so that just happened.
All right, folks, we're gonna end it here. Michael needs to go. We're gonna put a pin in that. We will probably schedule this to continue this conversation and go over, hopefully, if not the rest of part 1, but hopefully get into part 2 next Saturday. We'll probably be doing that for an 11. You're good with 11 a.m. same time, kind of same
Sounds
place.
good to me, brother.
Okay, yeah, I will get that scheduled. And now that I know what we're doing, we've got this all set up. I will get that scheduled earlier and get those links over to you as soon as I can.
Yeah.
So,
and I'll get the Josh Bowen links to you as well.
Awesome. Yeah. I'd love to read those. I love reading any of that kind of stuff because it'll get into a lot more detail than I could, and I simplify things, and I tend to do it too often. So I want to get into some kind of. I hope one of them is really pedantic.
Yeah, Josh, man, I love that. I love that man. He's awesome.
Yeah, I need to get a hold of him too as well because it's long overdue. It's actually been coming up where several times I've heard it and other people have heard it where they're like, somebody is telling me, usually a YouTube Christian, I would love to see Spatchcock come in here and defend his hero Josh Bowen, and I'm like, I don't need to defend him. But it's kind of weird. It's happened more than twice now, at least twice that I've heard it. I think it was from Praise and from Smokey.
Yeah.
A few other people. So I'm gonna email them and let them know, like, hey, I want to I've been long overdue interviewing him about that book that he put out, The Atheist Guide to the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And then
Josh I've been so fortunate. He's been on the podcast 5 times.
Oh, really? I didn't realize he'd been on that often. I knew he'd been on at least a couple times. Yeah.
Yeah, we joked about me having to get him a 5-timer jacket like they do on Saturday Night Live. But yeah, he's a great man. And he is. There's a part of me that would love. I would love for him to get just a little bit edgy and just go in and lay the fucking smack down, because that man is he is the most humble expert I've ever encountered. He has forgotten more about so much stuff than I'll ever know. But yeah, I would love to see him just kind of go like, here's why you're wrong, dummy, and just boom, boom, boom. But he's much too kind, right, to do that.
Yeah,
yeah. But he's a wealth, a true wealth of knowledge for sure. And he didn't pay me to say that either.
Yeah. No. Yeah, there are no solicited endorsements here. So
yeah, if you want, not that you need my help, but I'd be happy to facilitate a back and forth with you guys. Like tag you in and say, hey, Josh, you got to get together with Jefferson. I'd be happy.
I don't know what's on their plate. I'm just going to send an email to their main one, because I know if he doesn't check it, I know that Megan does.
Megan handles most of it. I know they've got some stuff coming up soon. Their Humans Against Poor Scholarship is coming up soon.
Yeah.
So he'll be coming on to talk. He'll be coming on the CA to talk about that again, because we talk about that every year. And so yeah, but there's stuff. But yeah, absolutely. And he's so generous with his time. And try to get the both of them. Try to get Megan as well, because she's so much fun. Megan, Megan's so much fun.
I was going to try to do that, because I was thinking about doing, because a lot of people have heard about his book, but I'm gonna see about doing that if they both have time for it. But
because he's also got the book on how to learn Sumerian.
Yeah.
Like he's got just tons of, like, he and Megan have got a bunch of stuff going on, and he's got the second piece of the Atheist Handbook coming out soon, I think.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, I know he's working on it, and I think they're getting close to wrapping it up, at least the draft. So yeah,
for sure,
getting close. Well, folks, with that, we're going to get out of here. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening, depending on where you are. Like, subscribe, or flag, hate, do whatever. Stalk me on Gmail, whatever you want to do. But take care, have fun. Thank you, everybody, for being here. A special shout out to the live chat's MVP, Simus Funk, because I booted him from the game for no apparent reason while just trying to highlight a comment. So
there you go.
Apologies to him. And another special shout out to Felix Rodriguez for haunting the live chat, and then being a good sport and getting trolled endlessly. #WitchGodFelix. So thank you, everybody. And with that, we'll see you all later. Thank you again, Michael.
Take care.